Welcome back to The Manual, podcast where we talk about the stuff most men's podcasts are too afraid to touch. This episode is going to be wild, raw, and real. Buckle up. What is up, everybody? Good to see you again on The Manual. I'm Joe. He's Nick. Last week, you heard Chris and I having an awesome conversation about the inner child. There's so much more there to unpack about that topic. But it really was sparked from current life events, what's been going on in our lives. And this week, Nick and I thought, since it's been 2 years since this idea started to become a reality, and the Freedom Group is coming up on celebrating 2 years of existence, coaching guys to freedom from porn, being in the men's workspace, working on healing, transformation, and really sparking so much of what I think has been in your and I's hearts for so long, Nick, of body, mind, and spirit healing, transformation, and living ultimately. So, yeah, that's where we want to start. That's where we want to end today. Just kind of a sit back, coffee chat about what that's been like. So, our audience may know this, may not know this. You came on full time earlier this year. I mean, both you and I have been working on this on the side for a long time, building it up in various phases to make sure that really we were testing everything that we were doing, that it was excellent, and that we could do it the way we wanted to do it when we went all out and launched. And this summer, this spring, represented kind of that official launch, if you will, where it's felt like much more real, much more tangible. And certainly the hiring of people around you and I has only added to that later this summer, which we'll get into. But it's been a wild, fun, meaningful ride for me. And I want to dig into that, what that's been like for you. So just as you think like back on that 2 years, I mean, we can start where this all started. I sent you a direct message on social media, just like off the cuff, because I saw a video that I felt like represented you in a very hilarious way, because you used to, when you and I were doing ministry together at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, were the king to walking up to a random group of strangers and asking them an oddly deep question that nobody else could manage to ask and to own. And it would lead to this incredibly deep conversation sparking. And I would consistently be like, what? How on earth did you just do that? How is this happening? And so I saw this video, this funny reel of this guy asking weird questions.
Kind of
and I
a
was like,
Ron
oh my gosh.
Burgundy-esque kind of guy.
Yes. Mahogany office.
Yeah.
Rich mahogany desk, asking them the strangest possible life questions you can imagine. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's Nick Red. So I sent it to you, and your response was?
Yeah, it was a couple of weeks later, because at that point I wasn't much on Instagram at all. And I pulled it up and I saw you sent that to me. And my response was, let's start a men's ministry. No, when are we going to start a men's ministry? And do you remember your response?
And I was like, funny you should say that.
You said, no time like the present.
No time like the present.
Because what God was doing in your life. And even just to pull it back a little further, like I know as people have asked us this question, like, when did this start? The reality is, I mean, way before that, right? It's like I've heard that somebody ask Father Mike Schmitz, how long does it take for you to prepare a homily? He's like, my entire life. My entire life goes into those. So if you're talking like practically, okay, let's talk about how many hours it takes per week. But like how this has come to be, like you said at the beginning, an idea started to actually bear fruit and come into reality. It's really cool how an idea, a concept, eventually, okay, has got to come to print. But as we engage our own stories of pain and addiction and walking the path of redemptive suffering as we submit to that process of living in reality, it's and engage in the desires of the heart too along the way has been and then there are certain moments in your journey that actually are, call them checkpoints along the way, or like pivotal decision moments where they're like, okay, this is a trajectory setting moment. And certainly 2 years ago, who would have thought that a stupid reel would be that? Because and then what God was doing in both of our lives and bringing us together, with you in a almost convalescent kind of way of being sick, and the Lord just coming in and using that as an opportunity to stir up a whole bunch of things in your own heart.
Totally. Yeah, so it was shortly after that, well, earlier that, I don't know if it was a month or 2 earlier, I had torn my ACL on both sides of my meniscus playing pickup basketball, something that I was doing weekly at that point, and first major injury I've ever had in my life. Broke a couple bones in my nose once when I was in high school because I got punched in the face, and other than that, no major
Really?
surgeries, no. Yeah,
I was
yeah,
just talking about with John Brown, my gym guy, my trainer. He goes, "Every man needs to be punched in the face one time." I've never
okay,
been punched in the face.
really?
Yeah, what was that? What was it that like?
Um, it was yeah, it sucked. I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure I mean, blood was pouring from my nostrils. Yeah, I remember, like, the whole front of my shirt was just covered in blood, and I
Oh,
broke my nose. I have a pretty big nose, I don't know if you can tell, but I broke my nose in 3 spots, and so to get it to go back, they have to re-break it and reposition
holy
it, and
cow!
then there was concern about a deviated septum and stuff as a
Okay,
result of it, so, uh, it certainly
so outside of
hasn't helped with the mouth breathing, at nighttime for sure. So I've always thought about it. I've never gotten big into mouth taping or anything like
it
that
just
at night,
started,
but yeah, I should probably do that more often because 'cause I'm definitely a heavy mouth breather at nighttime, but so
but
I did
outside
get
of that face
one
injury,
of the nose clips,
yeah,
but that's yeah, it didn't feel good. I wouldn't recommend it. Uh, but I mean, to some degree, it feels like I mean, getting into a fight, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that's a rite of passage, that a man needs to go through. Uh, I don't know that it can hurt. Unless it
something
becomes
about it,
a way of life, a
yeah.
way of dealing with your problems perpetually.
So
So,
outside of that injury, you tore your ACL was the
yeah,
other major injury.
ACL, both sides of my meniscus, which meant when I had surgery, I was gonna be if you just tear your ACL, surgery's still an invasive-ish, but it's like a 1 week, no non-weight bearing. If you get your meniscus, because your meniscus is cushioning both of those bones in your knee, it's 6 weeks non-weight bearing. So I was very limited in mobility for 6 weeks, which meant I spent a great deal of time sitting on my butt, not doing much. And right behind me, in the office, we had an inflatable mattress, a big cushy one that like accordion type of a thing that folds up into this traveling case. So it's not like it's a nice inflatable mattress that my parents had, and so I slept down on this level so that I could not have to butt scoot up and down the stairs. And it just gave me an incredible opportunity to think what God had been doing in my life over the past several years. I at that point was still not very good at slowing down or stopping. And so without an intervention like that, I don't think I would have. Certainly not that to that degree with, 3 young kids at home at that point, and my wife was working the job she's still at the major seminary here in the Twin Cities, and um, so it just gave me this opportunity, and there was so much, like you were saying, that was stirring in me, that was starting to come together. My background education in neuroscience, which I had used loosely in my work in ministry, and then very little in the work I did as an executive director, the training there, my passion and interest in running business and trying to figure out how to add value to people's lives and what does that actually look like to do in this space and how to marry ministry and business and all these sort of questions that have been sort of knocking around my brain for a long time in the previous year since I graduated college. And it's just started to all come together. Now, it wasn't an easy process. I think that document is about 97 pages long
No,
of just
the
thoughts.
curriculum?
Just everything, like how could this be valuable? How would you package this? What does this look like? And so, I mean, you were involved. I mean, once that started to build, then you got in there into that same document. You and I were going back and forth on different offers and different ways we can construct this to be the most valuable, how to preserve so it doesn't become so labor intensive in delivering it that you can't actually grow it. How do you still, I mean, this is labor intensive in that it's you working with a guy to develop behavioral patterns and new habits and help him rewire his brain, which takes real time, effort, and energy. So how do you do all that? Right. And so and at the beginning it was very much like not exactly sure what specifically what are we trying to accomplish here, right? What's the focus? What's the niche? What is the thing that we're doing here? Because when you and I started talking, it was like we love helping guys, we love hanging out with guys. We've been doing ministry with men our entire lives. And there's particular things stirring in us, but not exactly sure precisely what that is. Though in my own experience, like Ed Milet says, and I've said frequently, you're best equipped to serve the person you used to be. And for me, especially in those recent few years, though, like you said, it had been my story since I got introduced to pornography when I was 7. That was for me the real linchpin and focus at that time was I just started to really learn how to remove the habit of pornography
Yeah.
out of my life and get some legitimate freedom that I had been contending for a very long time in one form or another. And the tools felt so new and so valuable. And like, I wish this could have helped if I had these back then, which I really
Mhm.
hadn't ever had before. And so that's what for me started stirring the idea of the Freedom Group. And then as I was sharing my experience with other guys being sort of a natural marketer or somebody that just likes to talk and tell stories, as I was sharing my story with other people, guys started to ask like, hey, I need help with that too. Tell me more about that. And it was like, okay, I think I always knew it was a problem. 85% of guys use porn at least once a month, about 55% of women. Like it's a real issue
Yeah,
in our
those are the
world today.
stats, and we were walking with men for,
Right.
like, 25 years combined, and just yeah, those are the stats and the reality of our as we've walked with men.
Right. And that's again, wouldn't say this until much later on, but if you asked the average man in a pew in church, what are the top 3 problems in your life that you wish you could change? I believe the vast majority of men would say something to do with sexuality, particularly I think with pornography. Like I wish I didn't use porn. But none of those guys would put, if you ask that same guy, what are your top 3 hopes or dreams or dream outcomes for your life? None of them would put no longer use
Right,
porn,
right.
right? As
That's
the
the
dream
goal.
outcome, right? Or
Right,
the aspiration or where are you moving? Where are you trying?
right,
They understand that it's a roadblock to
right,
getting them to where they want to go, but it's
right.
not where they want to go. Right? But oftentimes because it's been around for so long and you've used it so long, you've learned how to manage life with it, or you think you have, rather than eliminate it and realize the multiplying effect that has on your capacity to be able to get to the dream outcomes, which is why we talk so much about porn as a meaningful solution to engaging pain and discomfort, to picking up and carrying your cross. Why is that such a big problem if it stays in your life to getting you to your dream outcomes? And when a guy starts to understand the connection between those two things, it starts to make a great deal of sense. Like, I don't get my dream outcome, whatever those things are. It usually has to do something with career, relationships, family, right? I don't get those things in the way that I want them if this is still a reality in my life, right? And I
Totally.
have to deal with the problem if I want the dream outcome. And so that again, I wouldn't have articulated like that, but because again, working with college students and then young married guys in the marriage and family ministry I led, just saw this being a problem over and over and over and over again and really tried to help all while still struggling regularly myself.
Couple things that come to mind as you're sharing. One, I just think it's so it's just it's so God how he's just I say it like this. I say he's an amazing economist. He uses everything. He can take this season where a man's pretty broken and in the eyes of the world, relatively useless. Well, now that we're all online, you can do a lot of stuff online. But there's an opportunity, or even I mean the parallels. Your leg didn't get blown in half by a cannonball like Ignatius, but the story of Ignatius comes to mind every time you share the story of he's lying in bed. I don't know how long it was, but he had two things at his that were available to him. One was the Bible, the other was the lives of the saints, and he started to get a vision for who he could become and for how the world could be transformed. And in that space began the spiritual exercises. The first time psychology, before psychology was even a thing, started being integrated with spirituality. And we have something that has changed the world. And I'll say it like this. I'm not saying what we're doing is going to transform the world, but I'm not going to not say that, actually. No, actually, I take the first one back. What started in that space, Joe, of when you really went there, and he took the opportunity, and you did too, like what this has been building up into and what potentially can build up into, I think is just the potential for this to transform the world is huge. And I just want to highlight what God can do with the man who's available and willing to enter into that space of, that could be a pretty crappy time. Number one.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And the caveat to that genuinely, and you and I mean, we don't just believe this in false humility. We say this to every single guy who we've ever encountered up until now, which is we don't care if you do our thing. Just don't do nothing. Right. And it isn't because we think, I mean, we're the only way and this is the ultimate solution, but we do feel like we've tapped into something that has been lost in many respects in the expression of the everyday man in the church.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much wisdom that is out there about what it looks like to live an integrated life,
Right.
body, mind, and spirit. And we reference 1 Thessalonians 5:23 and 24, where it says, may the God who is whole and holy make you whole and holy, put you together, body, mind, and spirit. If he said it, he'll do it, because that's the vision. And at the end of the day, again, those problems that man would list, or my former self would list as the things holding him back, were largely not holiness issues. They were lack of wholeness, right? And I think there is a reason why we see this dramatic, what's the fastest growing industry in the US today? The health and wellness industry. Why is that?
Right.
Well, it's because people are looking for wholeness. Why is it that Eastern religion is having a moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why are so many people listening to the Andrew Hubermans and these different neuroscience and psychologists that are catching the attention of the masses? Why are they having a day? Because people are hungry for wholeness. Why? Because they grew up in contexts that had oftentimes holiness expressed as an ideal with the experiential absence of wholeness. What does that look like practically? We go to church on Sundays. You don't miss. Go to church, go to confession, pray your rosary, blah. I don't say blah, blah, blah. All those things are really good and important, right? That's the expectation. That's what it looks like to be holy. Do these things, do the religious stuff. Mom and dad get divorced when I'm 10, or mom and dad fight all the time. As an adult, I don't know that I could say that I ever saw my dad genuinely love my mom. There wasn't emotional intimacy or connection in the house that I grew up in. Anger ruled the day, right? There was not a healthy expression around the dinner table of all of us trying to figure out how to do life together, right? There was this more military rule of the way that things were supposed to be and had to be. And so people experienced, and that's, again, I'm just talking about in the family unit, because that's where our attachment relationships are. And that's where we form that early development of the experience of wholeness, but it extends beyond the family. It's not the only place where we experience the lack of wholeness, certainly. But that, I think, has created the conditions where so many people, my close friends of mine, have left because they grew up in contexts, whether it be in Catholic school or in education, in religious contexts, or in their family where they were told to be holy, to look holy, right? But it manifested or became sort of the whitewashed tomb version of holiness. Play the part, perform,
Yeah.
right? While they lived in the condition of deep unwellness, right? And I think that's what, and I'd love to, explore from your vantage point, like when you started talking with me and this started to emerge, because porn, as you've said frequently to me, was never really the thing that you felt like your life, the culmination of your work, what you feel like as God has been doing in you was the thing that the problem you wanted to try to solve. But it was in the arena of the problems and issues that you wanted to help solve. So just like going back 2 years ago, personal hopes, expectations when we launched this thing and how they've evolved over time as has started to scale into something real, as it started to take on sort of a life on its own in the sense that it's bigger than just you and I now.
Yeah.
What's that been like for you?
Yeah. First of all, you said a lot there that I want to go down some rabbit holes, but I will not take that bait that I put out for myself. But to answer that question, going back, a couple things come to mind. One, and I don't know if we've referenced it in this podcast, but this podcast episode that was, I think, pivotal to the beginning of this was the Your Kingdom podcast, The Purpose of Counseling. And Adam Young talks about, he poses the question, what's the purpose of counseling? What's the goal of healing and therapy? He says it's not, the end game is not just healing or freedom, it's to reign as a king. And in order to discover like your kingdom, he poses three questions. What do you love? Okay. What do you hate? And I love how he breaks open that word. He says, we don't talk enough about hate in this world. He goes, I hate cancer, but not as much as my wife, who has dedicated her life to eradicating cancer from the face of the earth because of her story. Actually, there's something there. What do you love? What do you hate? And then where have you been assaulted? And not to dive into all three of those necessarily for me, but I think those are really helpful questions, listeners, to ask and to ponder upon. Like, what's unique in your heart that makes you come alive, that you love? What do you hate? And then where have you been assaulted? And I remember when I was certainly in full-time ministry, back when you and I were walking around the University of St. Thomas, it was often when I was kind of in a pit of desolation, I would have two desires come up consistently a couple times a year. And it's usually when I was not in a good space, but they were telling me something. And the desires were to do one of two things. One, it was either to go to seminary, or the other was to enter into the armed forces. And okay, so what's underneath that desire? That's okay. We can kind of make caricatures of desire, or like, well, it's about this and how things play out in your life, and what's the fruit, and what do things actually develop into? We don't know. And we think we have an idea of what a desire is and what the vision for our life is, but as you pursue it, God directs and iterates along the way, and it develops to something, as Scripture says, more than you could possibly think or imagine, right? But what was underneath those desires, I believe, was this deep desire to enter into a process, call it of initiation, a rite of passage. I wanted to submit to a process that it would take me down a path to become something, to become somebody. And I saw, okay, well, I see seminary can do that. I know the armed forces can do that. And so really, I mean, part of my story is I didn't have that. And a lot of guys don't have that. A lot of guys didn't have an older father figure, an older man who took them, like, it's kind of like the apprentice with the master in the workshop, working shoulder to shoulder and learning an art or a craft, and learning like the art and craft of life and becoming a man, and I would say becoming a king. And so much of my story is abdicating responsibility. And as I look at my story, all that to say, and I bring that to what we're doing here, is a lot of my story I see in a lot of other men. Where I just talked to my cousin who was kind of triggered by something I posted on social media recently, and he wanted to talk. He actually wanted to talk, and this guy's an atheist, and when we had an awesome conversation, incredible conversation. And one of the things we talked about was men's mental health. He's like, do you think men's mental health, that quote crisis, is actually a real thing? And I have no idea where he stands. And I said, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think men are being crushed in isolation. There's this lonely American man situation, and we're dying by ourselves because we have no one else that has really come alongside us. That whether it's as a brother or even as an older man, I think there's a deep desire in every man's heart to be fathered, to be initiated, to be brought somewhere. And ultimately, it's by the Father, right? He's the source, but he chooses to father us in the very real world through the medium, if you will, of human channels and men in our lives. And as I continue to be fathered and continue to be fathered by other men in my life, that's a deep desire to bring that to other men and to help them become someone by God's grace, to participate in that work. Because when we talk with men, the core offer, we're going to help you get free if you do the work. And you got to do the work, because it took a lot of work to get where we're at now. Like, we're not gonna fool you and say, oh, it won't take much work. You just got to kind of show up and pay the monthly fee and check some boxes on your app, and then you're going to get there. Like,
Yeah.
it's work to get there, to rewire your brain, but we're going to come alongside you in it. But when we talk to guys on calls and one-on-one, like even today, even this morning in a coaching call, it actually has an inner child reference. As one guy said, it was last week was week 2. And guys were like a few minutes late to the call. And I just say, hey guys, just want to say, let's try to show up on time, because we got an hour here. Really want to maximize our time. That was pretty much all I said. I want to start on time so we can really maximize it. And today, one of the guys shared that, like, when I said that, he was one of the guys that was late. He was like, oh, he had all this shame, all this condemnation. After the call, he was spinning. He was like, oh, I'm so, and so he started processing this. And I asked the question, I said, how old did you feel in that? Because I felt like I was 14. Well, what happened? Well, this thing that happened on the jujitsu mat, crazy story he ended up sharing, not my story to share. But the point is, it's not about the porn. It's not about the drug. It's not about the alcohol, the whatever things we're going to. It's like, okay, we're going to help you get free. How are we going to help you get free? By engaging your story and looking underneath the surface and underneath the hood, and like, where have you been assaulted, right? Where do you love? What do you hate? Where have you been assaulted? And it's just such a freaking gift to work with men. And I'm getting a little emotional just thinking about it, because I firmly believe that society rises and falls on the backs of whether men will lay down their lives self-sacrificially for their families, for their communities, or will they abdicate responsibility? And I'm excited to see what this is going to continue to develop into. But that's part of my story and part of my heart. Desire, and I still desire more for the rest of my life. I want out there, and praise God, there is more. And that's the exciting thing. This process. Last thing I'll say, this process. We tell guys to fall in love with the process, and this isn't just a one-year thing. This is a lifestyle thing. We want to be the type of men that fall in love with the ideals of who we want to become and doing the work, because there's a lifelong opportunity to continue to grow and to become that king, and God willing, to become the sage, as John Eldredge talks about. That at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So.
Working with men, you just touched on it related to this week's events, this morning's coaching call. Working with men is a super messy process.
Yeah.
If they're being honest, if they're showing up, if they're doing the work, sometimes is like amazing, like crazy breakthrough, wild stuff. I mean, there's guys that are coming to my mind for me that will show up one week and be like, wait, what happened? Like, that's the coolest thing ever. And then other weeks, that same guy will show up and be like, shoot, is he going to make it?
Right.
Is he going to quit?
Right.
Is he going to keep, he's teetering on the edge, and there's so much resistance. There's so much avoidance. There's so much outlitting, anger, projection that we all do. This isn't me just saying this is the guys we work with problem. This is me as I try to change as well. Speak to that a little bit. What's that been like, especially as, and we've doubled the size of the groups that we're leading over the past 6 months, then doubled the number, and then likewise the number of guys we're serving, which has meant complexity and scale. but also the variety of the guys, what they're dealing with, how they're expressing, where they're at any kind of time. That's a lot to manage. What's that been like for you to serve guys in this particular way that we do it in the Freedom Group? What have you seen come up for guys, and what kind of things have you learned is absolutely essential to like get into a guy's life and lead him in that space?
And first thing that comes to mind, and not to reveal too much of my own stuff, but one, and this is not what you're asking, but the humble gift it is to do the work and to get into another guy's world. I mean, it's vulnerable on many levels. It's vulnerable for the guy, and it's also vulnerable for you, because we go there, and he invites you in there, and you're like, okay, shit, I'm not sure where to go. But sometimes there's silence that is cold, and there's silence that is warm. And when you sit with the guy, and the warm silence is like a compassionate, loving, curious silence where you're with the guy, you're like, sometimes that's all a guy needs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a simple question that comes to your heart, that I try to do it with the Spirit. And just that's the disposition, this posture of like open-handed, I'm walking with the guy. But it's also exposing, because like we can't heal a dude, like we can't free a guy, we can't do it. And so it's really a gift. And that's in learning to love that vulnerable space of just walking with guys. And my, like, sometimes I'm confident because, okay, I've gone down this path, and that can actually be dangerous, because like this is a different guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is how it worked before. You've seen it work over and over, and there's certainly patterns, absolutely. That's number one, what I'll say. And you just go for it and trust that God's gonna work. So that I've learned to grow in loving that, as he's continuing to form me. But the other thing is, and I started telling guys this pretty much after the first group, because my girls they do some MMA stuff. They're 3 and 5, and they got their fight jammies like 6 months ago. That's what they call them. They're calling them fight jammies. It's kind of funny what they call them, but anyways. And I remember John Brown said, Nick, you know why they call them fight jammies? Or you know why they wear these? I'm like, I don't know what I said, but it was the wrong answer. He goes, because when you step on the mat, like, it doesn't matter your race, your color, your creed, your status, your level in society. We're all doing the same thing on this mat. None of that matters. We're all the same when it comes here. And so when we step on the mat in these groups, like when you rally around this one common cause, and most of every guy is Christian, most are Catholic. Actually, not every guy is Christian. There's been a couple that have not been, but the general worldview is relatively like God-centered, or at least an openness to that, and who I want to become. And there's this, like, you could have, this is just the power of Jesus too. When people start following Jesus, they're like, man, I would never be hanging out with you. But when does that make sense what I just said? I would, I don't know, it made sense in my head as it came out. I would not typically hang out with said brother, but we're heading the same direction. So when you get a group of guys together and there's a common cause that we're going after and a common beast we're trying to take down, that's just, I mean, super powerful. One of the guys, this is pretty cool, who is a non-believer, is partnered up with a religious brother. And for both of them, it has been the coolest experience.
Mm.
So just to navigate their daily calls together.
Yep.
And it's really neat seeing nobody is off limits when it comes to this thing.
That pair you just mentioned are guys that are in our process.
In our process, yeah.
Yeah, not at the gym.
Yeah, I was swimming back and forth there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, that's okay. That's when you started talking about them, I was like, "Oh, they're at the gym. What are they paired up doing?" And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, calls
Yeah.
they're making. They're yeah. No, that's really, really good." One of the things that I've had to get better at and lean in on is perceiving a guy's resistance and calling it out, saying something about it. Because I think I've always been relatively perceptive of and aware of another's emotion or behavior or attitude,
Yeah.
and not always spot on. But I very rarely has said, "Hey, do you see that? What is that?" You know, how were you feeling when you showed up to the call today? What was going on in you, right? And again, not in judgment, because I don't perceive it as judgment. I perceive it as
Totally.
like, oh, this guy's not interested in me. And so what that does to
Right.
me is it creates the temptation to try to get him interested. I need to make myself
Yes.
more interesting.
Yes.
I need to share something really, and I'm going to look at him to try and get feedback that he's engaged now,
Yeah.
rather
That's
than
good.
saying like, you know what, like a learned pattern of a mode of being for you has been this disengagement. That's not a me thing, right? And so I'm learning to see it, perceive it, and then check in on it. Hey, what's going on right there, right?
Hmm.
And we do a lot of that, and especially early on in a group process in the first phase of where are you experiencing it physically, right? Most guys can't name their emotion.
Yeah.
How you doing right now, right? Not sure, but what's going on inside your body?
Yeah, where do you feel it? Yeah.
Where do you feel it? Where are you carrying it, right? I can feel tension when I feel it. I can feel
Yeah.
avoidance. I
Yeah.
can feel disengagement,
Yeah. Even if
right?
I don't know the name of the emotion, I can
Right,
feel it. Yeah.
right. And so learning how to do that has been really helpful because it's helping I've found it to be dramatically beneficial to helping a guy build self-awareness. And I've needed that from people in my own life. Do you notice when you do blank? I don't receive it as judgment, like, because the answer is usually probably yes. I do notice that.
Yeah.
What is that?
I
Right? And
remember
yeah, go ahead.
I remember early on, I was just wrestling with I came to, you and I just hopped on the call and we were talking through something. And I was just beating myself up and like, I did this and blah, blah, blah. And all you said was, you said, that sounds like awareness with judgment. You highlighted that. Here's what and it broke me. I started weeping on the call. I'm like, and I think what it was I was seen by a brother. And it was like that
Yeah,
just warm space.
yeah,
And this sounds like awareness with judgment, Nick. And it's, man, those moments are gold.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and so it's knowing, I mean, that's a principle that we talk about, right? Like, why would that have come to mind? Certainly because I see you, but it's also a principle that we've developed intellectually and then in our own experience of what does that look like for me when I approach something with just simple awareness and compassion and space for like, I want out of this right now.
Yeah,
Right? And I'm not judging the fact that I think I don't want this anymore,
right.
but I'm just being aware that like I don't want to show up to group. This is something I've been sharing with the guys a lot recently because again, we're talking, going back to the inner child, which unless you listened last week, that might be new for you. But I am the archetype of the stressed child. So anxiety and stress, especially when I feel it 8, 9, or 10, was always the trigger for me to run to pornography. And I still get stressed out today. Right. And so I would wake up a lot of mornings and I'm actually curious. It doesn't happen much, if at all, anymore, which I don't know if that's character growth or because I've been doing the work, that's something has shifted, but it doesn't really happen anymore. I don't wake up with dread about having to lead a group or to go to group that morning. I
Hmm.
used to wake up, especially early on in doing this, where I would just have tons of resistance about wanting to do it, be anxious and tense and feeling stressed out about having to do that this morning or leading up to nighttime, like dinner ends and all of a sudden I'm stressed out. Right. And I remember seeing this clip, a reel on Instagram from a guy who does mindset coaching work. And he said, your physiology, your body doesn't know the difference between anxiety and excitement. So one of the most powerful things you can do in the realm of reframing if you deal with a lot of anxiety and stress is to simply tell yourself, what if I'm excited? Or simply even declaring that, like, I am excited. What is that? That's a reinterpretation of the emotion you're experiencing, which is exactly what you said. You negatively interpreted the experience that you were having, right? Which maybe it wasn't a negative, but what it wasn't a negative at all. You were asking yourself simply like, do I want this? Or what's going on here, right? But because there's the negative connotation to that question, well, if I experience doubt, it means blank, or I experience resistance, it means blank. We place all of these things on us that's no longer helpful or beneficial. And so for me, that same thing has been applied to whenever I experience stress or overwhelm or anxiety, more and more often learning to respond to it as like, I'm excited. And it's funny. It's a little brain trick, but it's funny how often it's actually true. Like I am energized and aroused and alerted to leading this group because I love it, and that's what I experience when I open my mouth and ask that first question and get into it and guys and like, then I'm in the zone and I love it. But shifting my state ahead of time so oftentimes just requires that moment of pause and then reinterpreting the emotion, the physical experience. Like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe that isn't anxiety. Maybe it isn't stress. I'm excited. And that ends up being the thing that, alleviates the stress to the point where it no longer compounds and I no longer get it into a state where I need to disassociate in order to be okay, which has been incredibly powerful for me. There's so much more to talk about what this past quarter has been like. We want to keep breaking that open over the coming weeks. We're grateful y'all have been with us, stayed with us. This is episode 11
From the double
of
digits, baby.
of the podcast. It's one thing that launched this past quarter. And when we have a chance to dive into this past quarter in the next couple of weeks, hopefully we'll be able to share more about what's happened in the past quarter and all that has occurred here, what we're so excited about, what's occurring, what we're learning, and then share about what's upcoming, what we're working towards, how you can get involved. So if you're listening, if you need support, if you need initiation, if you need brotherhood, accountability in your life, you know where to find us, thefreedomgroup.co. Come and get involved in the work that we're doing. You can join a freedom group. You can join the Kingmakers community. Get porn out of your life for the former and uncover purpose and get real traction to your goals in the domains of your life in the Kingmakers community. Grateful to have you guys here with us. Peace.